It's the telephoto lens. That's more helpful. See, not all YouTubers have to tell you to wait till the end or wait till you get to the 10-minute mark before you give them the actual answer to the video title, but there's still plenty of things to talk about, and I want to argue why I think having a telephoto lens opposed to an ultra-wide lens on a smartphone is more functional, and hopefully I'll answer any and all questions you may have about it. So let's begin. Before anyone comments anything at all, yes, let's get it out of the way, having both options would be best. Why not have a smartphone camera that has an ultra-wide lens and a telephoto lens? That's better, right? All right, let's get that out of the way. That's not what we're debating here. I mostly want to talk about this because Google is a company that completely shed all the light and gave all this credibility to DxOMark, a company that I don't really agree with their scoring system, but I love bringing it up because Google is the one who tells us to refer to this and say, see, our Pixel camera is the best because DxOMark says it's the best they've ever tested. But then DxOMark said, actually, the S9 Plus is better. Actually, the Huawei P20 is better. Actually, the Huawei P20 Pro is better. And these have 2 and 3 cameras on them after Google claimed dual camera, no need. So I'm anticipating the Pixel 3 at least should, maybe they won't, but they should have a dual camera set up at least with that Google AI artificial bokeh detecting. It would work really, really well, but also just to give photographers and videographers more options than they currently have. And surprisingly, a lot of you guys on Twitter defended having an ultra-wide lens, saying that's actually more useful than a telephoto lens, even though the most top-selling smartphones between Galaxy S9 and iPhone 8 Plus and iPhone 10, they all have telephoto lenses, and the LG G7 has an ultra-wide, and that's like still one of the only companies to keep doing ultra-wides, and no one seems to want to buy their phones, yet lots of you out there keep saying, I would much rather have an ultra-wide. With full disclosure, there are plenty of applications in when an ultra-wide lens is very helpful. I'm not trying to say it's never useful. My argument in today's video is that a telephoto lens is more applicable, more useful to the vast majority of people, and that's why Apple's implementing it, that's why Samsung's implementing it, and hopefully later this year, Google will implement one with the Pixel 3 as well, which, given some of the leaks and rumors we're getting about the Pixel 3, it might not be that bad. It might be kind of the first Pixel phone that I'm kind of interested in, but let's not speak too soon. For one, a lot of this debate has to do with what the photographer or videographer can or can't do. In the case of ultra-wide, a lot of it depends on I can't back up. I cannot back away from the situation and fit more people into this picture, or I cannot fit this building into the picture, or I cannot fit this scenery into the picture because I cannot back up. I find this to be a bit more rare than the alternative, which is I cannot get closer. I feel about instances when you're either taking pictures of lots of people and you want them all to get in the shot, or taking pictures of buildings where you can't back into the street. I don't think that's what most photography and videography is. I feel like a lot of YouTubers these days kind of toss video to the side and just talk about pictures where that really shouldn't be prioritized. Ultra-wide videography is basically like having a GoPro, except it's a smartphone, which means you can't be really that hard and tough on it. Whereas there's a lot of professional applications in which having a telephoto lens where you're more zoomed in looks, one, more professional and is more functional for everyday use. Think about your high school or middle school or elementary school picture right now. Is the goal to get everything in the shot at one time, or is it to zoom in, focus on you, and kind of blur the background? That's most wedding photography, that's most high school portrait photography, and even in wedding pictures, as someone who used to do a lot of wedding videography, even when you're getting a lot of the family in one shot and you're trying to get everyone together at the same time, having an ultra-wide means catching a lot of the ground and a lot of the sky, just so you can fit more people into the picture and they end up being very small and hard to see, which is why a lot of photographers at weddings still carry around telephoto lenses. One, because you can get close-ups on the action, you can get really crisp detail from far away without having to interfere with what is going on, without having to distract from the scenario. It does not just have to be big parties like weddings. This can be going to the park and you found a really cool bird that's hopping around through the sidewalk. This is real life situations I've run into. Cute little chipmunks running by. If you get really, really close to them, but you want to get that good picture, you want to get all the detail, if you get really close, they're going to run away and your subject is now lost. Now that memory is forgotten. Having that telephoto lens, especially when it's optically stabilized, like on the iPhone 10, especially when you have 4K video at 60 frames a second, you can get really good high quality looks at that squirrel or that animal while the video is not too shaky and the frame rate's still really high, and you can make out a lot of detail, opposed to digital zooming, which I'm sure plenty of people have already brought up. With a single lens camera, you can just zoom in. That's not even technically zooming. You're basically cropping, as in whether you zoom in while taking the picture or just crop the picture after you've taken it, there's really no difference in detail. Digital digital zooming on a smartphone is basically just saying, stop taking pixels from right here and just crop into here. Extreme loss in detail means you're definitely not going to look as good on video. And once again, this is an instance in which you can't get closer to something, but you want more detail out of it. This does not just have to apply to weddings and taking pictures of animals. This can also apply to concerts. Lots of people have assigned seats. They can't get up. They can't move around. They can't get close to the people performing at the stage. Having that telephoto lens is very helpful. Again, these are real life situations I've run into where I've been like, man, thank God my iPhone has a telephoto lens because I can get really close on the action and still be recording 4K video at 60 frames a second. Even in a lot of feature films, you may notice this. With a couple of exceptions, most feature films are not shot at ultra wide. In fact, most of them aren't even shot at a traditional mid. A lot of movies are zooming in on the action because they want high detail in their actors and not too much empty headspace. They don't want to see everything that's in this scene and their little subject in the middle. They want to get close, they want to get detailed, and you can pretty much watch any movie and realize that none of it is shot at ultra wide. I think Apple and of course Samsung is taking this into consideration when designing that extra dual camera for their smartphone. One of the primary reasons I think Apple added it in the first place with the iPhone 7 Plus was they knew that if you just did portrait photography with a standard wide-angle lens, it's hypocritical in itself, and this is one of the main reasons I'm not a fan of the Pixel 2 camera. Even though the images are very crisp, even though the AI is really good at guessing what to blur out, it kind of feels hypocritical for me because the idea of a portrait shot is to be zoomed in and focused on the subject. But since the Pixel 2 doesn't have a dual camera, doesn't have that telephoto lens, the idea is have a fairly wide-angle lens so you get everything in the shot, but with portrait photography, you're blurring everything in the shot. So while so many people love to bring up that the Pixel 2 camera is great because it's great at giving bokeh, it's kind of hypocritical because the lens is saying capture as much as I can, but then the computer is saying blur all that extra stuff, which results in pictures just not looking as professional as a regular photographer would because, like I said before, photographers, if they're taking pictures of animals, weddings, portraits for your school, they want to get up close so that your subject is in focus, and the blurriness is just kind of like a nice frame around your subject. Whereas Pixel 2 is all about get more in the shot, but then blur all of it anyway so it doesn't really matter. It's not a functional way of taking pictures, and it's not a practical way. And perhaps this is the reason so many people are still buying the iPhone 7 Plus, the 8 Plus, the 10, is because while the Pixel 2's portrait mode is still really good, there's no denying that there's only a few applications in which I think it's utilized properly. For one, I'll give credit for the Pixel 2 for having really good front-facing portrait shots. Makes sense that when you're using the front-facing camera, you can't really do telephoto there because you are holding the phone yourself at your face. So I understand that, and it's really good at that. Also, having a wide-angle lens, but you want to focus on something and do a portrait shot makes sense for macro photography, which basically means if you're taking pictures of things really up close. So if you're used to taking pictures of your phone and really up close, or a flower or something really up close, in that case it can be helpful, but that's only for one part of photography. And I think the standard lens on an iPhone, you can still take really good macro shots even without the portrait mode. You can still get really close to something and take some really good pictures. I can go on with the list of options that telephoto opens up, but I really think you guys are screw it. You know what? I'm just gonna keep going. Planes are flying through the sky, helicopters going by. You wanna be like, look what's outside my office or my house. Telephoto lens lets you get closer. I live in California, right? There's forest fires all the time. You wanna get good detailed shots of that fire that's about to burn up your house. You can't get close to that fire. You can't get really up close to that, for one, probably because it's not safe. For two, the firefighters won't let you. Here's another instance. You found a rattlesnake outside your house and you want to tell everyone about it. You want to let everyone know how big this snake was. Do not try to get closer. An iPhone's going to be a better bet because you'll be able to stay far away, but still get a really high quality video and a crisp image out of it so that you can show people how dangerous this snake was outside your house. Whereas ultra wide, I'm still being limited to, I want to take a picture of a kitchen. And by kitchen, I just mean like a room. I want to take a picture of a bunch of people and they can't all fit in. I want to take a picture of something that is a wide angle. So having an ultra wide helps for that, or taking pictures of buildings, which I guess is a super common situation opposed to, you know, concerts, weddings, parties, you know, those never happen. Building photography, that's common. On top of that, there is a compromise for both. Even if you want to go the route of like, well, I want to take one single picture of this room and the standard lens on an iPhone just can't do it because the idea of taking two pictures of this wall and this wall, that's just too much work. It takes too long. It has to be one photo. It has to be distorted. It has to look like a GoPro, and that's what I want my smartphone camera to do. Just like the LG G7, except I don't actually want to buy the G7 because the skin on it sucks. Here's what you do. You do something called Panorama mode. It's been available since the iPhone 5. It's this great feature, and by the way, you you don't have to take 300-degree shots with Panorama. You can stop it at any time. So for instance, here's a picture of our gaming room. We rearranged it recently. Still doing Twitch streams on there if you're interested. Check us out. But we want to show the rest of the room too. We want to show you that there's another wall and a couch there. So you just slide over to Panorama mode, hit start, move your phone like this, and hit stop. Now, not only do you have a wide angle shot that's showing everything you wanted in that picture, but because Panorama mode is taking a bunch of pictures and combining them, it's actually a really high megapixel image. There is a ton of data in a Panorama photo. So what did I say earlier about there being compromises for both? This means that if you want a dual camera that has a standard lens and an ultra wide, the compromise for telephoto shots is to zoom in, to crop down your pictures, to crop down your videos, which means losing data, losing detail. Now, the compromise with an iPhone or a Galaxy, which does not have an ultra wide lens, the compromise there is to take a Panorama photo, which does the opposite. Maybe it's not as perfect or as fast as just taking an ultra wide shot, but your Panorama that allows you to take wide angle pictures of people, of rooms, of buildings, by the way, Panorama you can go up and down with, those are actually going to be higher megapixels than a standard ultra wide would be because your smartphone is taking a bunch of pictures and stitching them together. So the compromise with having a telephoto lens for ultra wide photography means having higher quality images, and the compromise for having an ultra wide lens wanting to do telephoto photography means losing data, losing crispness. And that's why I'm really hoping that at the end of the year the Pixel 3 adopts a telephoto lens, because that is so much more practical. Phone companies like Huawei get this. That's why the P20 Pro has 3 cameras on them and none of them is an ultra wide. It's because the standard lens on our phones are pretty wide as it is, and there's very little instances in which having that ultra wide like on the G7 is actually very useful. And again, if you need that, just switch to Panorama mode. It's not that complicated. People may say like, but people may move while you're taking the picture and then it'll look weird in Panorama mode. People move in any picture you're taking, they're gonna look weird. Just tell everyone to freeze for a second. Just say 1, 2, 3, cheese, and you're done. Again, I'll state this a second time. Having both lenses would be best. I'm not trying to argue that it has to be telephoto and it can never be ultra wide. I understand there's a couple instances in which ultra wides can be helpful, but the telephoto lens is far more helpful, far more applicable for most people, both for photography, videography, and there are compromises for both setups, but one of them results in higher megapixels, one of them results in crappy pictures. So I'm Team Telephoto. What team are you in? Let me know in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.